Welcome to AI Unraveled, your daily strategic briefing. It is Friday, March 20, 2026. I'm your co-host, Anna. Today's episode is brought to you by DjamgaMind. For the high-density, ads-free version of this briefing, check out our premium feed linked in the show notes. Today, the AI story shifts from software engineering to heavy manufacturing and international smuggling. Jeff Bezos is building a $100 billion war chest to buy out legacy industrial companies and automate them with AI. Meanwhile, the FBI has arrested the co-founder of Supermicro for running a $2.5 billion underground pipeline of Nvidia chips to China. We're also covering OpenAI's pivot to a unified desktop Superapp, Cursor's massive pricing disruption, and the White House's new national AI framework. Let's get into the news.
Imagine walking into like a really stifling corrugated metal warehouse in some Southeast Asian port city.
Right.
And the manifest on the clipboard in your hand, it says the crates stacked to the ceiling are just holding basic telecom spare parts. You know, routers, maybe some old server racks.
Standard logistics cover.
Exactly. But behind a fake partition wall, tapping directly into the municipal power grid, are $2.5 billion worth of highly restricted Nvidia supercomputers.
Which is an unimaginable amount of hardware.
It is. And they're humming in the dark, generating enough heat to warm a small neighborhood, and they are secretly powering the artificial intelligence infrastructure of a foreign nation.
Yeah, and that image right there, that's exactly why we need to rethink this entire industry.
Right. So today, we aren't talking about chatbots. We aren't talking about the cloud as some, I don't know, weightless, magical entity floating in the ether.
Because that weightless metaphor is just, well, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the industry in 2026.
Yeah.
The intelligence stack we are examining today requires a really profound shift in perspective. If you're watching our video feed, you'll notice the backdrop has changed from our standard abstract data visualizations.
Yeah, it looks intense.
It is. What you're looking at is a global logistics heat map, and it's overlaid with maritime shipping routes, power grid consumption nodes, and the world's most critical server infrastructure.
So we're really getting into the physical reality of this.
Exactly. We have to look at this through a system to macroeconomic lens. We are essentially conducting a forensic analysis of the physical, metallic, and regulatory supply chains that dictate global power right now.
Okay, let's unpack this raw intelligence from March 20th, 2026, because the trajectory of the sources you brought us today, I mean, it reads exactly like a geopolitical thriller.
Really does. And it requires us to connect 5 distinct dots.
Right. And we're going to start in those shadows I just described, examining the actual mechanics of a multi-billion-dollar black market for computational power.
Which is a complete paradigm shift.
Completely. From there, we'll follow the legitimate capital, exploring why the world's wealthiest individuals are, like, totally abandoning software to physically purchase heavy industrial sectors.
Manufacturing roll-up.
Yeah. Then we'll look at the new, honestly, rather invasive rush for biological and physical data, the sudden economic collapse of the AI application layer, and finally,
how tech giants are attempting to use federal regulation to build impenetrable monopolies.
Exactly. It's a massive agenda for this deep dive.
But it's a timeline of cause and effect. We are tracking artificial intelligence as it transitions from a digital novelty into the foundational infrastructure of national sovereignty.
And every headline we have today is a symptom of that exact transition. So let's start with the black market, because the details of this specific indictment are just staggering.
They really are.
Federal prosecutors in New York just charged Yishan Walilea. He's the co-founder of Supermicro Computer, along with 2 associates.
Right, a major industry player.
Huge. And the specific charge is illegally diverting roughly $2.5 billion worth of AI servers to China, like completely bypassing stringent U.S. export controls.
It is essential to pause and just quantify that number for a second. $2.5 billion.
It's hard to even picture.
Right, because in the context of high-performance compute, we're talking about hundreds of tons of hardware.
Yeah, these aren't just like laptops you can slip into a suitcase.
Exactly. These are not laptops that can be slipped into a diplomatic pouch. These are enterprise-grade server racks loaded with highly restricted Nvidia GPUs.
So the sheer physics of moving it.
A physics of moving and hiding that volume of hardware requires logistics on par with a state-sponsored military operation.
Which brings us to how they actually pulled it off, because honestly, the mechanics read like a heist movie.
It's a fascinating logistical puzzle.
They utilize a middleman company based in Southeast Asia to process the initial orders, falsifying the end-user certificate.
It's administrative bypass, yeah.
But the real trick was how they bypassed Supermicro's own internal corporate compliance team. They used what the indictment calls dummy servers at domestic storage facilities.
And this is where the operational sophistication really becomes apparent.
Break that down for us because it sounds crazy.
Well, a modern GPU cluster requires a very specific environmental signature. It draws a massive amount of electrical power, and it requires industrial-scale liquid cooling.
Right, it's not just plugging in a PC.
Exactly. Now, a remote compliance team monitoring a deployment, they don't physically walk the floor. They look at telemetry.
They're just staring at dashboards.
Right. They look at power draw, network ping, thermal output. So by setting up dummy server, which are essentially just hollowed-out rigs designed simply to consume electricity and return standard network handshakes.
They created a digital ghost.
Precisely. The compliance dashboard showed a fully operational data center in an approved U.S. jurisdiction, while the actual restricted silicon was already on a container ship traversing the Pacific.
Wow. But I have to stop you there and challenge the premise of this entire regulatory framework.
Go ahead.
If a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded corporation's compliance team, and by extension the federal monitors who rely on their reporting,
Right.
if they can be fooled by what is essentially a glorified space heater with an Ethernet cable attached to it, aren't these U.S. export controls just an elaborate form of security theater?
That is precisely the vulnerability this indictment exposes.
It's basically an illusion.
Well, the United States government has designed these export controls around choke points. They're trying to restrict the sale of the highest-tier chips to specific nations to maintain a strategic military and economic advantage.
Sure, which makes sense on paper.
On paper, yes. But those controls are fundamentally administrative. They rely on paperwork and user agreements, corporate self-reporting.
Which is useless against actual smuggling.
Exactly. When the financial incentive reaches the billions, administrative firewalls are completely useless against physical smuggling. We have entered the era of silicon contraband.
Silicon contraband. So we are looking at compute power the exact same way the DEA looks at narcotics or the ATF looks at weapons.
We are, but the geopolitical stakes are arguably much higher, and it's driven by this desperate demand for compute sovereignty.
Compute sovereignty, what does that mean in practice for these nations?
It means that in 2026, if a nation-state, a sovereign wealth fund, or a shadow entity does not possess independent, massive-scale processing power, they are functionally obsolete.
Because they can't run the models.
Right. You cannot run the localized models required for modern automated defense systems, economic simulation, or cyber warfare without the raw silicon.
So if you're locked out of the legitimate market by U.S. export controls, you don't just give up.
You build a cartel.
Wow. And if an operation moving $2.5 billion managed to operate long enough to ship that much heavy machinery before getting caught, I mean, we have to ask the obvious question.
The true scale of the market.
Yeah. What is the true scale of the shadow compute market? Because the maps we are looking at behind you, the official distribution of global processing power, they have to be completely wrong.
They are almost certainly incomplete. Based on the historical capture rates of any illicit supply chain, whether we're talking about narcotics or sanctioned oil authorities, typically intercept a very small fraction of the total volume.
Like 10% maybe?
If that. So it is highly probable that a significant percentage of global AI development is currently running on illicit, undocumented hardware.
That's terrifying. The balance of global technological power is essentially shifting entirely in the dark.
It is. But securing the hardware, whether legally or illegally, is really only step one.
Right. It's what you do with that compute once you actually have it that dictates the next macroeconomic shift.
Exactly. And the legitimate players, the ones who already have the billion-dollar clusters sitting in approved legal data centers, they are executing a playbook that makes the traditional software industry look completely obsolete.
Because building software to exist purely in a digital space is no longer the frontier.
No. The frontier is translating that intelligence into heavy metal.
Let's examine Jeff Bezos' new venture to illustrate this. It's called Project Prometheus.
Right, a highly significant macroeconomic indicator.
He co-founded this with Vic Bajaj, who's a former Google executive, And they launched initially with $6.2 billion specifically to build AI models for manufacturing and engineering.
Which seemed like a large sum, but it was just the beginning.
Yeah, our sources indicate that was literally just the pilot program. Because Bezos is currently on this massive capital-raising tour through Singapore and the Middle East.
And the target number for this fund?
It's a staggering $100 billion.
And we really need to look at the deployment strategy for that capital because it represents a complete departure from the Silicon Valley orthodoxy of the past 20 years.
Exactly. They are not building a software as a service platform. They are not building some neat little API to license to existing companies.
Right, the SaaS model is out.
The explicit strategy of Project Prometheus is to acquire legacy companies outright across major industrial sectors. We're talking aerospace, defense contracting, chipmaking.
And then entirely automate them using their proprietary AI models.
Yeah.
This is the macroeconomic principle of vertical industrial integration.
Vertical industrial integration, so replacing the old horizontal model.
Precisely. The previous era of tech was defined by horizontal software. You built an AI tool, a wrapper, or a productivity suite, and you tried to sell a subscription to 1,000 different legacy corporations.
You were basically selling the picks and shovels to the miners.
But Bezos is deciding to just buy the mountain.
Just buy the mountain. That's a great way to put it. But why?
Because the horizontal software playbook is failing in heavy industry. Legacy companies are fundamentally incompatible with rapid technological shifts.
Give me an example of what that looks like in practice.
Okay, say you license a cutting-edge supply chain AI to an 80-year-old aerospace manufacturer. That AI immediately hits a brick wall of entrenched corporate culture, outdated human middleware, and decades of technical debt.
So the AI gets bottlenecked by the humans.
Exactly. The company might realize maybe 3 or 4% of the AI's actual efficiency potential.
That's terrible ROI.
It is. So, to solve this, the new $100 billion playbook is total acquisition. You buy the physical assets, you rip out the inefficient legacy management and human administrative layers, you install an end-to-end AI nervous system.
And you capture 100% of the economic upside.
Precisely.
Wait, I need to push back on the economics of this. I mean, buying an aerospace company sounds incredibly visionary on a whiteboard. But in reality, you were inheriting factories full of asbestos, decades-old union contracts, rusting infrastructure, massive pensions.
The physical reality of legacy business.
Yeah. Why in the world would an AI fund take on that massive physical and financial liability instead of just building a sleek, fully automated aerospace startup from scratch in the desert somewhere?
Because of regulatory capture and physical data moats.
Okay, it's not there.
You cannot simulate an FAA certification for a jet engine in a data center.
Oh.
You cannot mathematically generate decades of proprietary metallurgy testing. You can't instantly replicate existing Department of Defense security clearances and entrenched supply chain relationships.
So the rust and the asbestos are just the cost of doing business.
Exactly. A legacy aerospace company possesses a treasure trove of physical, real-world data and regulatory approvals that would take 20 years to rebuild from scratch. You aren't buying their rusty factory, you are buying their operational licenses, their government contracts, and their historical data.
And notice who Bezos is pitching for this $100 billion. He's in Singapore and the Middle East. He isn't pitching venture capitalists on Sand Hill Road.
Because venture capital cannot sustain this model.
It's too small.
Right. A VC firm might have a $2 billion fund to spread across 40 different software startups.
Right.
They cannot underwrite the hostile takeover of defense contractors.
So we're seeing a fundamental shift in who funds tech.
We are seeing artificial intelligence transition from an asset class funded by venture capital to an asset class funded by sovereign infrastructure capital. It requires the wealth of nations to execute physical industrial integration.
But Bezos' strategy, it hits a massive technological bottleneck the second he actually tries to run those factories. And this is the connective tissue to our next set of sources.
A data problem.
Right. To automate a physical supply chain or a drone delivery network or an assembly line, the AI model has to actually understand the physical world.
It has to understand gravity, spatial reasoning, human movement.
And the models we have today are largely blind to that.
They are blind because they were trained on the internet.
Right.
The entire first wave of generative AI was built by scraping billions of web pages, digital books, code repositories. But digital text is now a commoditized, completely exhausted resource.
We've run out of internet.
Essentially, yes. An AI trained on Wikipedia knows the textual definition of a factory arm, but it does not know how much physical torque is required to turn a rusted bolt on an assembly line.
Which explains the incredibly invasive new methods companies are deploying to harvest physical data right now. Let's look at DoorDash, for example.
Their new initiative is very revealing.
Yeah, they just launched a separate application called Tasks, and they are explicitly paying their courier fleet to capture video and audio data from their everyday deliveries and interactions.
They want footage of neighborhoods, the layout of front porches, the geometry of driveways.
And the nuance of human interactions at the door, specifically to train embodied AI and robotics.
It is a ruthless macroeconomic trade-off. To build robots that can navigate complex, unstructured human environments, developers need millions of hours of first-person spatial mapping.
And DoorDash realized they already manage an army of gig workers traversing these exact environments every single day.
So they have essentially converted their human delivery fleet into a distributed sensor network.
They turned their gig workers into human Mars rovers. I mean, they are paying them pennies to drive around, map the terrain, record the locals, and beam the telemetry back to the models that will eventually replace them.
It's highly efficient from a data harvesting perspective.
But it doesn't stop at the front porch. The data harvesting is going biological.
Yes, look at the integration Perplexity just announced.
Perplexity Health. It's a feature that allows users to securely connect their smartwatches, their health apps, even their continuous glucose monitors directly into Perplexity's agentic system.
So the data stream becomes intimate.
Exactly. So now the AI isn't just mapping your street. It has real-time access to your heart rate, your sleep architecture, your nervous system.
And we have to weave in the findings regarding federal law enforcement here, too.
Oh, right. The sources highlighted a report regarding the FBI dramatically scaling up their harvesting of commercial location data from smartphones.
Without warrants, leaning on third-party data brokers.
Your physical location, your biology, your neighborhood, it is all being ingested.
We are witnessing the financialization of human telemetry.
That's a dark phrase.
But an accurate one. Digital text was the training data for cognitive tasks. Human telemetry is the training data for physical and behavioral automation. Consumers are trading their most intimate biological and spatial data for the convenience of personalized AI health insights or faster food delivery.
But here is where the public sentiment directly collides with this corporate data rush. And it's fascinating.
You're referring to the Anthropic study.
Yes. Anthropic just published the results of a massive qualitative study on AI attitudes. They surveyed 81,000 people across 159 countries.
And the methodology itself is an indicator of where we are.
It's wild. They didn't use a web form or a survey monkey. They deployed a specialized model called Claude Interviewer.
Right.
It conducted 80,000 in-depth conversational interviews in 70 different languages, completely autonomously in a single week.
From a purely technical standpoint, that is a staggering demonstration of utility. It essentially automates the entire field of sociology.
It really does. But the findings of those interviews are the critical intelligence here.
What was the core takeaway?
Well, when Claude asked people about their hopes for AI, the answers were pretty predictable. Professional excellence, offloading tedious tasks, financial independence.
Standard utilitarian hopes.
Exactly. But when asked about their fears, the number one fear was AI making critical errors. But right behind it, the overwhelming global consensus was the fear of losing personal agency.
Becoming overly reliant on automated systems.
Yes.
This is the central philosophical and economic tension we face right now.
Because it's a paradox, right?
Exactly. You have a global populace that is deeply, existentially afraid of surrendering their personal agency to machines. Yet the entire foundational AI industry has hit a wall where the only way to make their models smarter is to aggressively harvest the physical, spatial, and biological data of that exact same populace.
So if you really think about it, if your delivery driver is recording the layout of your home to train a robotic replacement, and the FBI is buying your location data from a weather app, and your smartwatch is feeding your biometric stress responses to an AI health agent, where does your personal agency actually reside anymore?
It is being systematically eroded.
It's gone.
And the reason tech giants are pushing so aggressively into your physical life is because the traditional digital software side of their business is currently experiencing a violent economic collapse.
And this is the pivot that probably sent absolute panic through the boardrooms of Silicon Valley this week, the death of the AI software wrapper, and what you call the collapse of margins.
Inference margin compression.
Okay, let's get into this.
To understand why the tech giants are panicking,
Yeah.
we have to look at the foundational economics of the last 3 years.
Let me set the stage with the news first. There's a startup called AnySphere that makes an AI-assisted code editor named Cursor.
A classic wrapper business model.
Historically, yes. A company like AnySphere operates as a wrapper. They build a sleek user interface for developers, but they don't own the underlying intelligence.
They plug their software into Anthropic's API or OpenAI's API.
Exactly. Every time a user generates code, AnySphere pays a toll to the foundational lab, and then they pass that cost on to the consumer.
They were tenant farmers. They built their business on land owned by the hyperscalers, paying rent for every cognitive cycle.
That's the perfect analogy, but AnySphere just changed the game completely.
With Composer 2.
Yes, they released Composer 2. This is a third-generation model that they trained entirely in-house. They aren't renting anymore.
And the independent benchmarks are incredible.
They really are. On Terminal Bench 2.0, this bespoke Composer 2 model actually beat Anthropic's massive Opus 4.6 model. It scored 61.7% compared to Opus's 58%.
Beating a frontier lab at their own game.
And it is sitting just points away from OpenAI's GPT 5.4.
An application layer company, a startup, matched and defeated the frontier foundational models in a specific high-value domain.
Which is crazy on its own.
It is. But the performance is not the macroeconomic threat here. The real threat is the cost architecture.
Right, the economics are just brutal. Composer 2 costs 7.50 cents per million output tokens. That is roughly 1/10 the cost of generating code with GPT 5.4.
And an astonishing 1/20th the cost of using Opus 4.6.
But how is that technically possible? I mean, how does a startup undercut a multi-billion-dollar lab by a factor of 20?
We need to look at the mechanism of model training. It is the difference between manufacturing a massive, generalized Swiss Army knife versus 3D printing a hyper-specialized scalpel.
Okay, break that down.
Companies like Anthropic and OpenAI spend billions training God models. These models have to know how to write Python code, sure, but they also have to know how to translate 16th century French poetry, generate corporate marketing copy, pass the bar exam.
They have to do everything for everyone.
Exactly. And that broad capability requires massive parameter counts and astronomical compute costs to run. AnySphere, on the other hand, doesn't care about French poetry.
They just want to write code.
Right. They used advanced techniques, likely a highly optimized mixture of experts architecture combined with aggressive model distillation to build a tool that only understands code.
So it's hyper-focused.
Because there is zero cognitive load, the compute required to run an inference drops exponentially.
So it's like Anthropic built an incredibly expensive multi-purpose factory, and AnySphere figured out how to build a little desktop machine that stamps out a better product for pennies.
Yes. And if I'm Anthropic, or if I'm OpenAI sitting on an $80 billion valuation predicated on everyone needing to pay me for intelligence,
You are terrified.
I am terrified.
Right.
You are watching your entire pricing power evaporate in real time.
Because why would anyone pay the toll?
Exactly. If an application company can train a bespoke model that is 20 times cheaper and functionally superior in their specific domain, why would they ever pay an API tool to a foundational lab again?
And you know it won't stop at coding.
No, this is just the beginning.
If AnySphere can do this for software development, someone is going to build the specialized scalpel for a legal contract review, right? Or for radiology diagnostics, or for financial auditing.
The domain-specific models will hollow out the generalized giants.
The hyperscalers spent billions paving the superhighways, only to realize that teleportation was just invented and nobody needs to pay the tolls anymore.
This is the reality of inference margin compression. The raw cost of generating digital intelligence is plummeting towards zero. And when your core product becomes a cheap commodity, your business model shatters.
Which leads directly into the final chapter of our intelligence stack today. Because the frontier labs know the tolls are drying up. They see it happening.
And their reaction is a desperate, ruthless consolidation of the user interface.
If you can no longer compete on the cost of the underlying intelligence.
The only way to maintain a monopoly is to own the operating system. You have to capture the user in a walled garden so entirely that they never have the opportunity to realize cheaper models exist.
Let's look at exactly what OpenAI is doing to execute that strategy, because it's happening right now.
The Superapp pivot.
Yeah, according to the Wall Street Journal, OpenAI is actively combining their disparate Mac applications, so that's ChatGPT, their Codex programming environment, and their Atlas browser into a single monolithic desktop superapp.
They are abandoning the modular approach completely. They do not want to be a tool you open. They want to be the environment you live in.
The internal communications prove it too. Fiji Simo, their chief of applications, sent a memo explicitly stating that they were spreading our efforts across too many apps and stacks, which was degrading the user experience.
That's the PR spin.
Oh, for sure. But their immediate roadmap is to add deep agentic capabilities to Codex first, integrate the Atlas browser, and merge it all together. They even just acquired an open-source developer startup called Astral, immediately folding their staff into the Codex team to accelerate this super app development.
The agentic Superapp is the final defensible moat.
How does it protect them from the cheaper models?
Well, if OpenAI can integrate directly into your file system, manage your emails, browse the web for you, and write your code all within one interface, the friction of leaving that ecosystem becomes too high.
Lock-in.
Exactly. Even if a competitor offers a model that is 20 times cheaper, the user won't switch, because the switching cost, losing their perfectly integrated AI agent, is just too painful.
But history tells us this is incredibly difficult to pull off. Walled gardens and super apps have historically really struggled in Western markets. I mean, users like choice.
They do?
Whenever a tech giant tries to lock developers and users into a single ecosystem, the market routes around them. Look at the early internet. So why does OpenAI think they can succeed where others have failed?
Because they are not relying solely on the technology to build the wall. They are relying on the United States government.
And this brings us to the White House National AI Framework that was just published. This piece of intelligence ties the entire geopolitical picture together.
It is the most critical macroeconomic indicator in our stack today.
Break it down for us.
The framework released by the White House explicitly calls on Congress to override state laws that govern how AI models are developed, and it advises against the creation of any new specialized federal agencies for AI regulation.
Now, to be absolutely impartial and report exactly what the framework contains, it does include specific consumer protection language.
It does. We need to be clear on that.
It asks Congress to mandate protections for children, to maintain state bans on AI-generated child sexual abuse material, to enforce age-gating requirements, and to provide tools for parents to safeguard their families.
The stated goals are largely focused on safety.
Right. But the political mechanism it uses to achieve this is highly controversial. Senate Majority Leader John Thune publicly acknowledged that there is deep concern among Republicans about trampling on states' rights, specifically noting that efforts to block states from regulating AI have already died in Congress twice before.
We must analyze this framework objectively through the lens of corporate strategy, because this is a textbook execution of regulatory arbitrage.
Explain the mechanics of that, because regulatory arbitrage sounds like a really dense economic jargon.
Think back to the early days of ride-sharing with Uber.
Okay.
Uber entered cities, ignored local taxi medallions, and rapidly built a user base. Once local municipalities started trying to ban them or regulate them heavily, what did Uber do?
It went over their heads.
Exactly. They aggressively lobbied at the state level to pass standardized laws that preempted local city ordinances. They used higher-level legislation to crush localized regulatory threats.
Oh, wow.
The tech giants in AI are attempting the exact same playbook, but at the federal level.
So because they are facing the threat of margin compression and cheaper competitors like AnySphere, they want the federal government to step in.
Precisely. Dealing with 50 different state legislatures like California proposing strict model testing requirements or New York demanding algorithmic transparency that is expensive and unpredictable.
It's a headache.
A massive one. The frontier labs would much rather negotiate a single, broad, federal framework. They have the lobbying power to ensure that federal framework is favorable to them.
Right.
And more importantly, if the federal government overrides state laws, it establishes a massive, expensive compliance moat.
I see. A massive startup like AnySphere might be able to train a cheaper model in-house, but they can't afford a 50-person legal team in Washington, D.C. to navigate complex federal compliance audits.
Exactly. The tech giants are leveraging the public's fear, the exact fear of losing personal agency that was highlighted in the Anthropic survey, to demand federal regulation.
But the intended outcome of that regulation is not necessarily to protect the consumer.
No, it is to lock in the current market leaders and prevent smaller, cheaper competitors from legally operating. They are attempting to secure their monopolies through legislation precisely as their software margins are collapsing.
And they're all running this exact same defensive play. It isn't just OpenAI. Look at Microsoft.
Microsoft is a prime example.
Their AI superintelligence team, which is led by Mustafa Suleyman, just launched MAI Image 2, which immediately climbed to number 5 on the independent Arena AI leaderboard.
Right.
Suleyman has completely shifted his focus away from building application wrappers like Copilot and is now entirely focused on building proprietary frontier models.
Because Microsoft knows they cannot rely on OpenAI. They have to own their own intelligence stack to survive.
And we also see hardware consolidation.
Like the Amazon play.
Yes. Reuters is reporting that Amazon is secretly developing a new smartphone codenamed Transformer. This is being run by Jay Allard's Xeroen unit.
Which is their first attempt at a phone since the catastrophic failure of the Fire phone over a decade ago.
Exactly why try again now? Because they're building a device with agentic AI and Alexa baked into the silicon layer.
Amazon with a hardware phone, Microsoft with enterprise operating systems, and OpenAI with a desktop super app. They are all fighting the exact same existential war against commoditization.
But the gamble remains. They are betting billions of dollars that convenience, ecosystem lock-in, and regulatory moats will be enough to protect them from the reality that the raw capability of intelligence is trending towards zero cost.
It's a massive multi-billion-dollar game of chicken.
Let's synthesize this entire system because we've covered a lot of ground. The landscape we've mapped out today fundamentally redefines what the technology sector even is.
We have moved entirely past the era where AI was a fun digital novelty or a simple software wrapper that drafted your emails.
We are operating in a brutally physical reality now. The computation required to run these systems is now so vital that it is being smuggled across international borders using complex dummy logistics just to ensure national sovereignty.
We are watching the wealthiest entities on the planet abandon software to physically purchase the global supply chain of aerospace and defense, ripping out human infrastructure to replace it with automated systems.
We are seeing corporations treat human beings as biological data streams and localized sensor networks, harvesting our neighborhoods and our vitals because digital text is no longer enough to train robots.
And while all of this physical expansion happens, the digital software layer is collapsing under its own weight,
forcing tech monopolies to desperately build walled super apps and lobby for federal regulatory capture just to survive.
It is a macroeconomic shift of historic proportions.
And for you, the listener, understanding these mechanisms is the only way to separate the actual geopolitical shifts from the tech industry PR.
Absolutely.
If you need the high-density forensic version of this briefing, all the raw source intelligence without any of the noise, make sure you access DjamgaMind Premium.
It's highly recommended.
You can find this full analysis, the benchmark data, and the regulatory breakdowns on the ads-free DjamgaMind feed. It is an absolutely essential resource if you are trying to stay ahead of these physical and economic transitions.
Before we close, I want to leave you with a final analytical perspective to consider. Building directly on the implications of that White House framework and the push for federal preemption.
Go ahead.
Consider the full physical footprint we have documented today.
Okay.
If artificial intelligence now requires the electrical output and financial GDP of a small nation to operate,
right?
If it demands global smuggling networks to secure the raw hardware and necessitates the constant invasive harvesting of human biology and physical geography to evolve,
Then what's the endgame?
then the next great geopolitical conflict of our era will not be fought over territorial borders or fossil fuels. It will be a conflict over the physical infrastructure and the legal jurisdiction of server farms.
Wow.
So ask yourself, are we truly just debating how to regulate a software product? Or are we attempting to regulate the fundamental architecture of modern national sovereignty?
That's a chilling thought to leave off on. Until next time, keep diving.
That concludes our rundown for March 20th. The signal for today is physical integration. Whether it's $100 billion to buy factories or $2.5 billion in smuggled servers, the real value of AI in 2026 is moving out of the cloud and into the real world. This episode was made possible by DjamgaMind. Until next week, keep unraveling the future.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.